So a lot of what I do is questions and answers, okay, to try to get you to better understand. And one of the things that I always want to make sure that I bring across, I'll say it now, I'll probably say it in the middle, and I'll say it towards the end. The Catholic Archdiocese now bringing us as counselors, as part of the Archdiocese, all of us go through a ministry training, and all of us go through, of course, sales training and how to be able to present the different products that we have in the cemeteries. In doing that, this is no longer just about how much is a plot. This is about understanding what our faith is and being able to follow through with that, okay? It's very important for us as Catholics. I was talking to somebody just a while ago, and they asked me, well, what's the difference, Bill? I mean, why is it different for me to go to Queen of Heaven as it is to go to Forest Lawn? Right? The difference is the same difference as to why you walked into that church this morning. Why do you choose to go to that church and be with your community in this faith? Because we all call ourselves Catholic, right? And this is where we choose to be Catholic. So it's the same type of thing. Always understand that a Catholic cemetery, there's two things that make it a Catholic cemetery. One, it's been consecrated by our bishop. Can anybody give me an example of a consecration that we go through in our life in the process of our faith? Does anybody, can you give me an example of that? Confirmation. Okay. I always say baptism is kind of our initiation. For many of us, our parents made that decision for us, right? But confirmation is that opportunity for us in our faith to say yes, to reaffirm and to say, I'm going to be Catholic, okay? Burial in a Catholic cemetery is the same thing. That is consecrated land. Now, I never realized this until I talked to our Archbishop, but do you know the only person that can do a consecration? The bishop. Not our priests, not our pastors, not our monsignors, but our bishops. That's what creates a consecration. So way back a long time ago, before my time and probably most of your times, there was a bishop that came into these cemeteries and consecrated this land as hallowed ground. Okay? So I'm going to undo a myth that you heard in the last presentation. This will bring some clarity. The other thing as far as a Catholic burial is the body has to be whole. Okay, does that mean you cannot be cremated? No. That means you cannot separate the ashes. Okay, it was brought to your attention. Yes, that's possible. Yes, believe me, I worked for a mortuary for 4 years. And I was telling Susan, I had families that 7, 8 kids, everybody wants a piece of mom or dad. And they get these little pillars. And it's beautiful thought, but in our faith, we have to keep that all together. And the interesting thing is I've had several occasions where I've had families have to bring that back together to follow through with what mom would have wanted. Because once the education was brought to their attention, they started, whoa, wait a minute. I didn't know that. With my own mother loved the fact, she's always told me, son, I want to be cremated. She loves the ocean. That's her refuge, okay? Just spread my ashes out over the ocean. She said, Mom, you might want to go talk to your pastor, right? Because I'm not going to be the smart son and say, Mom, you got to do it this way. Because then she'll just say, no, that's okay, son. So she went to her pastor, spoke to him, and came to an understanding that, so what have I now done? Well, the beauty of what's going to happen real soon here at Queen of Heaven, we're putting a new development into there. And for the first time there, we're going to have a water feature. That's actually recirculated water that has a stream. So I was showing her kind of a peek. I said, Mom, I think I have what we need. So I showed it to her and she says, that's beautiful. That's where I want to be. So now I have both the things that I always wanted when I thought about pre-planning for my mom. One, the way she wants it. Two, the way I want it. Because I want her to be able to follow through in her faith. That woman is a Eucharistic minister. She goes every Saturday and Sunday to take the Eucharist to people in nursing homes and people that need it. I tell her, you know, she is my example of faith in the Catholic faith. Why would you not see that through? Why would you not see it all the way through the end Okay? So that's what Catholic burial, a lot of what it's all about, as far as making sure that we see it through. When we're babies, we're baptized, we're initiated. As we get older, we confirm. And we say, we're going to take our place in this church. Then God blesses us with gifts and grace and tells us, this is what I need you to do to serve me. And then at the end, our last example to our families and for ourselves is to see it through. And I think Catholic burial does that for you. That's the major difference between a Catholic cemetery and a secular cemetery. Okay? Anybody see Deacon Uriati's presentation this morning?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Beautiful. Empowering. My gosh, I had goosebumps. It was incredible. Right? But what it showed me too, the passion that he had in that talk was all about how we respect our lives all the way through, right? The issues that he was bringing up, and as we've gone over all day today, I've been in a couple of the talks, it's about how we represent the respect for life as individuals and as Catholics. So I think it's important for us to be able to share that and educate other people on that. And that's why I come out and I offer my time up to be able to try to bring some clarity to that. One of the things as far as a Catholic cemetery that I think people should understand is also this. Every cemetery, a secular cemetery, is a for-profit cemetery. What that means is you go in, and if there's a grave that costs, give me a price, John, $7,000, $8,000. $8,000, there's a certain cost to that particular grave that's going to pay for the overhead, that's going to pay for future development, that's going to pay for, and then there's a profit. And that goes right now to stockholders, because most of these companies are all now publicly owned, big companies. In a Catholic cemetery, we have some of the same costs, right? We have labor, we have development of the cemetery, all the things that we have to do as a cemetery, but the difference is the surplus goes directly back into the ministries of our church. See, the person that sees that and looks at that group of money is our Archbishop. He decides what he needs that money for. At times in the past, he's had to make decisions that have kind of stopped our development a little bit, right? Because he's elected to look at other ministries that needed to be taken care of first before we had our development. We're fine with that. For some people, they get upset because, oh, I thought you were going to put a mausoleum in at Queen of Heaven, or I thought you were going to do this. It's not meant to do anything against you. It's that we are part of a larger church. Does anybody know how far the archdiocese stretches out? Santa Barbara. Santa Barbara, then furthest east is Pomona, right? Pretty much. North would be, of course, our foothills, and then south would be... Yeah, absolutely. That's Holy Cross Pomona.
Yeah.
And you know the interesting thing about Holy Cross Pomona? Last December, when I came back in this position as a regional sales manager, they were doing probably about 3 services a month. It's a smaller cemetery, okay? The community of Pomona is fairly large, but it's very kind of a tight type of community. Today, just with educating, I've been in 6 different parishes in that area, all the way out to Claremont, Chino Hills, and done these kind of talks and just educating people. We average on average now we're at about 3 to 4 a day. But here's the interesting thing. We had a month last month where between what was done pre-arranging and what was done at need. When I refer to at need, that means you've had a death in your family and we need to make that arrangement now, okay? So between those two, they had sold 78 graves in 1 month. See, you can look at a big number and say, oh, we got 1,000 graves. But when you start selling them at 78 graves a month, all of a sudden you start looking forward and you go, uh-oh. And that's what our Catholic cemeteries in Los Angeles are all about. We have a large area to take care of, right? And it's growing. I look at our cemetery in Simi Valley, which is out there near Newhall. And if you've ever been out there off the 123 or the 118, oh my gosh. It's kind of like going down the 15 like you're going towards San Diego. It's growing so much. And that growth is going to involve Catholics. We've opened up 4 new churches in that area. 2 of those churches have congregations of over 5,000 people. That means where are they going to be buried when the time comes, right? So as a Catholic organization, we don't just think about how is our population growing, but where are our faith-driven people going to be buried, right? Because the way we look at it, here's an interesting thing. 2008, 2009 was one of the most difficult times in our Catholic faith. So many people went, right? Guess what's happening today? Coming back. They're coming back. And sometimes they're coming back to be buried. They're dying, and their wish is to be buried in a Catholic cemetery. Okay? So we have to make that happen for people. But we make that happen as a group. Okay? When people tell me, Bill, why is it $8,000 for a grave? Because we need to make sure that 200 years from now, our great grandkids can still follow through with the example that we've left for them. See, that's one of the most beautiful things about a cemetery that I think of, secular or Catholic. When I look at a headstone or a memorial, I see a beginning date, I see a dash, and then I see an ending date. Now, if I look at that from a faith perspective, we've talked about it. There was a beginning, there was a life, and there was an end. If the end is just about getting rid of the body, then I'd have no reason to talk, right? But it's more about some of the stuff that Ron talked about. I really believe in that, the service aspect of it. It's like having a wedding, right? You can go to Vegas, you can elope, you're legally married, right? It's all good, it's okay. But when you go to a church wedding, when you see a wedding here, when you see those people come out of the church, right? What do you think? Doesn't it renew some of those vows that you had in your own marriage? Or doesn't it make you think about, boy, someday I'd love to have that, right? Because it's an example of how we see our faith through. We've decided as Catholics, that's how we want to engage in this type of sacrament, okay? So, that's a little bit. I know you guys probably have a lot of questions, so I want to open it up to you guys, because I think educating is all about what are your issues, what are your needs, what are you thinking, what do you need answers to? So, feel free, ma'am.
Well, I want to be cremated and he wants a burial. So if he were to die first, then they would have to open the casket and then put my ashes in.
No.
No. Okay, it's just on top, then my ashes would be on top.
Here's one of the beauties of, and this is a direction we're going in where we will be there in a couple months, even with Queen of Heaven, if it was close to here, but most of the burials that are going to be done are done what's called a lawn crypt. A lawn crypt is the benefit of a mausoleum, but with the tradition of ground burial, okay? We preset vaults into the ground, so whether it's a cremation or whether it's a full burial, there's a separate location for each of the two persons going in there. Now, right now in the state of California, pretty much a double right of interment is about all we can do. There's a couple that you'll run into that are triple, and they involve maybe 2 cremations. But it gets very difficult to design a memorial for that. Because when you look at a memorial, it's only so big. To try to get 3 names on there, it's really difficult. So we really discourage that, and we try to make sure that there's only 2 people in there. But that's why it's become a lot easier. And even if it were just a standard grave that required a vault, we would use a smaller vault for the cremation, and then we would use a larger vault for the full burial. So say he's the full and you're the cremation, right? So if he did go first, that's kind of easy, because we would just go to double depth, do his burial, and then the upper portion would be available for your burial, for the cremation. If it were the opposite, we would open the grave to single depth and then dig a deeper hole just for the cremation, and then the next one would be on top later. There's still a section of earth in between made for settling and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, here's the thing that people often think they have to do is wait, right? I got to wait We got to wait till you die. If it's, say, for instance, you're the one that's being cremated, so if you were to pass away, we got to wait for him to die to be able to bury you. No. I want you to have that grace immediately. I want your family to be able to grieve. And I firmly believe that they have that opportunity when a burial takes place. Because, as they said, there's a finality to it. There's a finality when you see the casket closed for the last time. But let me tell you, when you see that person go into the ground, you should have that comfort, especially in a Catholic cemetery, that that's going to be forever. This is where you'll come back, and this is where your legacy and your history is. This is where your heritage is for your family. That oftentimes is what chooses graves for us, I think, sometimes, right? You were asking the question about, I think it's your in-laws that had a grave at resurrection. A lot of times that will be the reason why people stay in a specific cemetery. I know people, myself, I have family at All Souls in Long Beach, Resurrection, and Calvary. So I kind of have to make a decision. Who did I like better, right? No, but honestly, now that my wife's father's passed away, my father-in-law loved him dearly, it'll probably be Calvary. I'll probably buy a crypt because I feel I was close to him. I think that's a nice heritage. There's a lot of niches and things of that nature. But who knows with what's going on at Queen, my mom wanting that. So it's just determining what's best for you as a family and how you want your heritage to go. Because oftentimes you'll come into our cemetery and this person has been buried in this section, right? And then you say, is there anything in that section anymore? No. We can still have heritage in the cemetery, but that section, those people were buried in the 70s. So it's pretty well done. It's pretty well. Every once in a while we'll have somebody return a grave for the reasons that you were saying. If they move to another state and they just feel, you know what, I'm never going to use this and nobody in my family lives in that area anymore, so I'm just going to return it back to the church. Okay? So it just depends on how you come to that decision.
So are there any Catholic cemeteries here that have a mausoleum other than Calvary?
You have Calvary, Holy Cross in Culver City, San Fernando, which is Mission Hills, and can you shut off the camera? No, I'm kidding. And you will have an additional mausoleum being put in at Queen of Heaven. Okay.
Is it one way or the other? Is it less expensive, more expensive burial?
I think they're about the same. That's one of the interesting things with mausoleums today. Like when I go to Calvary, the interesting thing to me is when I did this, I started with the Catholic cemeteries in 1996. Back in 1996, the grave price in comparison to a mausoleum was like half. So because everybody thought that the mausoleums were for the rich and famous, right? You got to have some money to buy one of those, right? But now, because of how things have happened, now that our land is so limited, you have certain cemeteries that, because they have so little land, it's prime. So the cost is more expensive, just like we would have in our housing, right? So now mausoleums, it's kind of come to this even level type of thing. So it just depends on what your tradition, your wants and needs are that you choose. Because very oftentimes, like at Calvary, there are times where you can actually purchase a mausoleum cheaper than you would be able to buy a ground burial spot.
Right, that's what we did with my mom.
Yeah, so it's and there's a lot of advantages, I'm sure, like our counselors, if you ever had an opportunity, if you have any personal questions that you want to ask specifically about pricing, things of that nature, John is one of my counselors, John Viena. There's another one that you'll be able to talk to in the room, Esmeralda Avila. They can explain to you some of the benefits of prearranging for a mausoleum, a niche if you're being cremated, a grave, the differences that people have told us over the years that they feel. I'm big on niches and mausoleums because of convenience and because of just the fact that I don't have to mess with the earth. Some people love that though. Some people tell me, no, Bill, I don't want granite. It's so cold for me. I need to touch the grass. Well, that's your tradition. That's great. Me, I like to be able, my grandmother's buried in a mausoleum. I like to be able to place my flowers, have my little conversation with her, and then I'm back to my busy life. Because that allows me to visit, right? Otherwise, if I go to I have a Nina who's at Resurrection, right? My Nina Tere, every time I go to her grave, I have to have an hour and a half, right? Because I got to trim the marker, because none of her kids will do it. I have to make sure her flower vase is pulled out. You know, I loved my Nina, so I want to make sure it's right. But she's in the ground. So that's part of what taught me, like, I want to make sure that I'm in a mausoleum, because I don't think my kids would do the same thing for me. so I'm kind of thinking ahead a little bit and saying, if as long as they can give me 20 seconds, I'm good, right? I'm good with that.
So
Yes.
if it comes to the mausoleum and there's a casket and also an urn.
Yeah, you can do that as long as it's a companion mausoleum. And the most important thing to understand too is in a Catholic cemetery, or any religious cemetery for that matter, you're purchasing the right of interment into that grave. Okay, some people get confused with that because it is different than a secular cemetery. In a secular cemetery, you're purchasing property. You're actually getting a deed. You're actually getting something in your hand. And some people think, oh, that's great. Okay, I have friends that, I'll use Rose Hills as an example. They purchase property at Rose Hills, come to one of my presentations and say, uh-oh, I might have to sell this thing back. And then they call there and they say, what's the price of a grave in this section? Oh, it's $15,000. They get all happy because they only paid $5,000 for it. But they don't realize that's like a needle in a haystack. You got to find the family that's going to want a grave in that section near where you've purchased, right? Otherwise, who they're going to call is probably a broker who's going to sell it for a third. They may make a couple $100 over the $5,000 that they paid. Whereas in a Catholic cemetery, you're purchasing the right to inter. That land can never change hands. It's sacred, okay? That is something that should make you feel very secure, right? Because that can't move anybody. We can't take anybody out unless you as a family ask us to do that, okay?
I have a question. I have
Sure.
a sister-in-law that she has a plot.
Mhm.
You know, she purchased, or her family has one. Her mom and other family members are there, but she is no longer practicing Catholic. So that's not where she wants to be buried. So she's thinking she could sell that. No?
She can transfer it to another family member. I mean, whatever you do as far as money is concerned, that's up to the family. But as far as a transfer, we will allow somebody to transfer within their family because they're Catholic. Again, one of the first questions we're going to ask you when we sit with somebody and share information is, are you Catholic? Because I have to tell you, that's the only person that we'll bury. Now, in saying that, married to a Catholic, baptized a Catholic, in our faith, once you're Catholic, you're Catholic. You can say whatever you like about your faith, but from a Catholic perspective, you're always part of us, and we will always welcome you back.
Right.
Okay? So I have a little sister. My little sister goes to Calvary Chapel, and that's one of the reasons that I come out and I speak to Catholics, because she's very faith-driven. Love my little sister, okay? But when it comes to talking about Catholicism, right away she goes off the deep end, right? She's got all her opinions about that. But when I speak to her about the faith that I have and why I do what I do, she goes, well, you're a different Catholic. What does that mean? You know, no, I'm like every Catholic out there that once educated on this kind of stuff, decides for themselves whether or not they want that for their family. Because the reality is, folks, come on. You're not going to be there. Now, I can't say that for sure because I've never had that out-of-body experience, but we're not going to be there. So we have to trust, part of our faith is that this is going to comfort our family, and this is going to be a place where, here's the most beautiful thing that I see in a cemetery, is when people come to visit after a few months, and instead of tears, it's memories, right? It's remember when mom did this, or remember when dad did this, or remember when, right? Those are what make us go through our grief process. When you stop that, okay, Why is it wrong to put an urn in a closet? Because you've never grieved. That's maintenance. And I'm sorry to be the one to tell people that. But when you are you respecting life if at the end of that person's life, they're nothing more than something that's maintenance? Because he's absolutely right. There's actually a statistic behind that of how many people are left at houses. You could talk to realtors. Talk to a realtor in any area and they'll tell you they found an urn. They're selling a house, they go up in an attic or something, they go, what is this little gold thing? Right? And then they freak out. It's like, well, what do I do with this? Because if they know any better, that's a person. Right? So it's something really that I think we're called to not just make those arrangements, but we're actually, and doing it pre-done, like they were talking about, pre-planning. It's important because the first thing, I just sat with a couple days ago, married 54 years. And you know what they admitted to me? They have never mentioned the word death to each other ever. And I said, with all the decisions you've made in your lives, kids, colleges, houses that you've purchased over the years and all that, never have you ever talked about death? And the guy looked at me and says, no, in fact, it's funny because I had a life insurance policy with work for 50 years. I worked in my company for 50 years. I don't have that life insurance policy anymore because I don't work there. He goes, so even the plan that I had as a youth and raising my family, it seemed like a good plan at the time, but he says, to be honest with you, Bill, I'm just blessed that I've had enough money that now we feel we can take care of this. And I said, his name was Gilbert. I said, Gilbert, if you would have talked to me 20 years ago, I could have taken care of it back then. And it would have been a third of the price that you're going to pay today. But it's not just about price. It's not just about money, but we have to think of those things. Okay? Just like they were saying. So it is important to prearrange. Any other questions? Sure.
Here's one of the difference between Catholic cemeteries and secular ones. Because a Catholic is allowed to be buried in a secular cemetery, right? But it's just, because what I remember hearing was that, well, the priest blesses it, but I guess it's only blessed, not consecrated, right?
Right. So there's a good example. Like I will tell you, and this is my analogy I always give. My analogy is, there are times my sister has invited me, and I think it's been part of her growth in her faith that I go with her to her church, even though I don't agree with everything they say or do, right? And I make sure she understands that. I still want to go to support her in her faith because I think it's important for everybody to have a relationship with God, first and foremost. So that can't be wrong. So is it permitted? Of course it is, because priests go to cemeteries all the time. The difference is it's just blessed. So I feel blessed when I go to Calvary Chapel sometimes. There's times where I'll sit there and go, that was a good point. I like that. I can learn things, right? You can learn things in any situation, right? So it's okay, but is it what we're supposed to do? Okay, our canon law, which is the rule book, okay, if you want, it's like this thick, 630 pages. It states there, like I said, it has to be in hallowed ground, consecrated land, and it has to be whole for it to be considered our Catholic burial rite. So I think we've gotten away from that a little bit. I mean, one of the biggest pushes you'll see in the next 2 years is not just an education of all of us and bringing us all back into the faith of our burial rite, but our priests. Our priests to renew their ideals and what their teachings are about our Catholic burial rite. And then how do we, cremation. Cremation is a big thing for the church, right? I always tell people this. 8 years ago, I remember a Monsignor telling me, well, in the Catholic faith, cremation is tolerated. I thought, that's an interesting word. So I wanted to get the meaning behind the whole thing because I said, tolerated? What do you mean tolerated? He goes, well, we don't promote it. Today, with the issues that we have with land use and everything else, and hopefully, here's the most beautiful part of this, the actual vision that we will have a growth, a spurt of people in the Catholic Church coming back and being a part of this faith, we have to embrace it. It's something we have to look at. And when you see some of the projects that the Archdiocese is doing right now, if you guys are ever out in the valley, going to Mission Garden, beautiful. They have a whole cremation garden that's been created with what we call cremorials, which are individual or couple-oriented cremation arrangements where you can put 2 urns in them. They have a little plaque, but it's in a beautiful garden. They have statuaries. Some of the stuff that we've seen in secular cemeteries forever. But the Catholics have said, well, that would be kind of promoting cremation, so we can't really do that. We're beyond that now, okay? And more so in this archdiocese than any other that I know of. So it's definitely something you'll see embraced more. You'll see more people coming around to talk about why, cremation is something that's, some people tell me that all of a sudden it's permissible. It's been a long time, because I'm 51, born in 64, and that's when Vatican II happened, so it's 51 years old.
What about non-Catholic spouse being buried in following Christ?
Together in life, together in death. That's our premise. Okay, if you're and I'll tell you, let me tell you some of the situations that we've had come up. I have had couples, right, that are one Catholic, one Jewish. They're both buried in our cemetery. Partially because the Catholic won, I guess. Right? I mean, the reality is, now, one of the things that we did, to accommodate and for the family's sake, is maybe above the name of that person that was Jewish to put a Star of David or that type of thing. I mean, most of our memorials and things have to be religious in nature, but there's nothing that states, we want people to see that, hey, here was a Catholic husband and wife, or a Catholic and a Jewish husband and wife, but together in life, together in death. Okay? We'd love the same thing. I mean, I'm Hispanic. I know it doesn't look like it. I do speak Spanish, my first language. But for me, I want the whole family together, because that's when I have the most joy, is when my family's together and they're experiencing a party or, some kind of celebration. That's when we are at our highest level of joy. So the same thing is applicable. So a lot of what we do is try to create that environment for you in a cemetery where it's, here's your heritage. Because that's a hard thing too. Have family that's buried in some like Resurrection or Calvary over the last 80 years, and you better have a whole day because you're going from one end to the other to the other. It's difficult. So now we've gotten kind of smart at this a little bit. So when we sit a family down, we say, okay, what's your heritage? Tell me about your family. Tell me about your kids. Tell me about, because we will be the ones that will determine whether that's important or not. I can't speak for my children. I really can't. I've brought them up the best I can. They went through Catholic school their whole life. Everything I thought I could do, I did. But they're going to make their own decisions. But here's the way that I've seemed to have captured my children. I've purchased those arrangements for them as far as graves. And I figure it's going to be so expensive by the time they get around to thinking about this. This will be their only choice. So it's a little bit of manipulation, but so it's a hard question, because there's not very many priests that will tell you, no, you can't. And we don't want them to, because people have already made arrangements that way. But at the same time, you should really, really think about, and there's a lot of people that undo their purchases at secular cemeteries because they come to the realization that, oh, okay, well, this is the Catholic way. It's just dependent upon where you feel your faith is, to really know whether or not that's something you have to do. Okay. No, that's good, because that is a big topic right now. There is no such thing as a Catholic mortuary. And what I mean by that is John and I are hired by the Archdiocese. The person that signs my check is the Archbishop. And that's a very busy man. Okay? So the difference, we have a mortuary on our premise at Queen of Heaven, also at Calvary, Culver City, and Mission Hills, and then went out in Oxnard. That was an outside company. Okay? That was a third party, for-profit company that basically leased that parcel of land from us. Okay? Have served Catholic families. Now, here's one of the things that was very interesting in their relationship. They could only serve our families. So they couldn't open up to everybody around here. Okay? Like Custer Christians, they can serve any faith. Right? But the Catholic mortuaries, and this, so what it's come down to now is a name that was trademarked. So we always want to make sure, because I know Grace and I were talking last week, we want to make sure that people aren't misled or anything like that, that there, at this point there is no such thing. Doesn't mean that you won't see it in the very near future.
Well, unless it's at a cemetery that has one, then, because, I don't know if I told one of you, we have plots at Rose Hills. And when my mother-in-law was buried, the priest came and they did a service and everything there on one of their chapels, but they could not have a mass.
Right.
They could not have a mass, and they did everything there. So, to me, that I want a mass and everything.
Yeah.
I have to do everything outside.
It's a little challenging, huh?
There, you know.
Yeah. And that's the thing, I mean,
The whole family, my
it-
husband is a with his a family man as far as with his brothers and all, you know.
Mhm.
They're,
In
our-
Rose Hills.
Are our kids and everything, we have plots over there.
And again, see, sometimes you have to really take into mind, I mean, one of the first steps that we'll go through with people in pre-planning is what are the cultural or what are the things in your heritage that are important to you? For me, being Catholic is major. Another thing is I want family, right? I've always been brought up with a big family, so I want to make sure that that's included in any decision that I kind of think about. For some people, their service to our country. You heard earlier, a gentleman, Ron was talking about a gentleman that wanted to go to Riverside. Okay, I'll tell you, in a Catholic home, that's one of the biggest issues that I come across sometimes. I've sat with husbands and wives, and the husband says, "I'm good. I got Riverside, free. I'm good." And the wife goes, "Well, okay, you're good, but I'm not going anywhere near there. So we got to take care of me at least." And then all of a sudden he goes, "Wait, you don't want to be buried with me?" It's like, "No, I don't want to be in Riverside because my kids won't be able to come and see me." That's the discussion that I'd rather y'all have as individuals that are alive. Because one is missing if you're dead, right? And then you never really know what that other person wanted, okay? Or worse enough, if my belief or your belief is that we're together in life and together in death, that separation occurs because you want to do what's best or you want to do what your husband has said he wanted. But then if you have those feelings that the kids aren't going to go or you're not going to be able to visit, why would you do that to your husband, right? Why would you follow through with that if you already have that idea? And sometimes I think when couples are able to talk about stuff like that, one can see the other's point and say, "No, you know what, you're right. I never really thought about that." And so maybe it's a different decision that way. Because it's a great thing to have a person honored that way. Okay? But they can be honored that way in a Catholic cemetery. We can have both the religious and their service to the country with honor guards and everything. We can have that whole service in our cemetery and fulfill those two heritages. But it just depends on what really is going to motivate you. Because we're just trying to get people to admit that they're actually going to die. Realistically, I mean, it's amazing, but there's a lot of people in denial and not thinking. And there's just too many things that happen in this world for us to not be prepared for that, because it is very expensive. I think it's gotten, I used to tell people all the time, back in 1996 when I came into this business, I came into the Archdiocese part of it, I could probably do a full arrangement for cemetery burial, and that includes the grave itself, the vault, which is what you put the casket into to be able to be placed into the ground, a memorial, which is kind of the headstone, and maybe a flower vase. and then what they call the interment fee, or the opening and closing of the grave. That whole package was about $2,800. And one of the things they used to tell us as salespeople, because I was part of a sales organization back then, so to me it was all about sales back then. They used to say, Bill, you need to let people know that every 7 years this is going to double. I said, well, that's a line. That's pretty good. You know, I might use that. And then something happened in 2002. I was writing a contract for somebody, and I looked down and it was like $5,400. And the light bulb went off. And I thought, boy, that wasn't just a line, because it's almost 7 years and it's doubled. But we just get so used to things changing like that, things going up, right? My mom bought her house in 1970 and it was $12,000. I bought my house, well, I don't even want to say. Ridiculous in comparison. But things go up and things happen that way. So it becomes harder and harder for us to prepare. One of the reasons I love to come in and even talk to younger people, you know, college groups and people that are in their 30s and stuff, is because when you get to that point in your life where, we were joking about it this morning, weren't we? I'm getting to be about that age where I should start thinking about that. By that time now, all of a sudden, now, are we still in that period of time in our lives where we're earning an income? Are we still in that time where everything, you know, I can go out and, like my dad was in construction and stuff. So when my dad wanted something, just got another job. Just got, you know, I'm going to build this room on this house and I'm going to do this for this person. And right, he just picked it up a little. But as we get older, we don't really have that. We don't have that ability anymore. We have a limited amount of income that we can make. So we're putting ourselves in the position of making decisions at probably the hardest time in our life to be able to make those major financial decisions. So that's why I want to make sure that at least people have the education. Here's what it is. What you decide to do with it, that's up to you. You know, but hopefully it's giving you a little bit more of an idea about the difference between Catholic, secular, because as it goes in this area, I was a sales director for Rose Hills for 3 years. I wanted to learn what the other side said, right? And I can tell you the one thing that I can never combat there is that they have such a large cemetery. There's 1,500 acres there. It's the largest cemetery in the world. Most people don't know that. So here's the difference. When we want to develop something in our Catholic Church, we have to look at our church. From Santa Barbara to Pomona, we have to look and say, okay, we have to look at our Catholic charities. We have to look at our homes for pregnant women, all of our ministries. We have to look at that and say, okay, where and how can we develop? Now, we're very blessed right now because I have never seen us develop as we are right now because we have a need. Because there's been so many years that we haven't done that. So we've looked at that. But now it comes down to when we look at a place like Rose Hills, I'll tell you, and this is my confession to you. I say this to every church so that you can please forgive me. But they approached me as a sales director and said, Bill, how do we capture the Catholic family? I said, I got easy. Give me a statue of Our Lady of Guadalupe in a section, right? And I'll tell you, it's done. And they said, but, ooh, Bill, that's too Catholic, right? Isn't that like, wow, that's like, I'm sure, like, I have friends that are priests. I'm sure I'm going to be in trouble if I do this. And this is like the top brass in Rose Hills. And I said, Our Lady of Guadalupe is not just a Catholic symbol. It's an icon in our culture. I'll tell you, you will bring people that will be wanting to be in that section. And it was no joke. In less than 6 months, they sold that section out. So a section that basically cost them about $1.2 million to build, they made $6 million on. But that's what they have. See, secular cemeteries have the ability. We need something. We want to market something. This is how we do it. How many of you in this area, because you guys are in that prime marketing area for Rose Hills and for Forest Lawns, where you get the brochures, Or you get the things that say, for only $72 a month, you can have this, right? All those types of things are trying to capture your attention. You'll never see that from a Catholic cemetery. And unfortunately, I always have to tell my counselors, we don't want to be those people. We want to service you. We want to move you through that progression of your faith. But in no way, shape, or form do we want it to appear as though we're marketing to you just because you're Catholic. No. This is your home. So when you come into our cemeteries, it's basically to facilitate what it is that you need. Sometimes that requires some conversation, right? Because you don't know what you need. I don't know what you need unless we talk. And sometimes in our talking, we figure it out. Hey, you know, I'd like to do this. Or we figure out those answers. He wants to be full burial. I want to be cremation. Well, that's not a big deal, right? But we thought it was, right? So, any other questions?
About the transfer, like if you buy land, I mean, not buy land, you buy the right to be.
There you
into-
go.
And then later, yeah, can you only transfer within your family, or so immediate family, or how far, or how is the domain of transferability?
I think as long as you can prove, like you can assure them that it's a Catholic family that it's being transferred into, I don't think you'd have that much of a problem. Because even with the right of interment, we've had people that have purchased a grave, and here's the sad thing, I'm sure all of you probably heard this, but you know, I buy my grave for me and my wife, and then my sister's husband dies, and my sister doesn't have the means to be able to purchase a grave. So what I do is I give up my grave. Well, guess what? I get to start all over again. Okay? So, yeah, sometimes those things, and believe me, here's the other difference between a Catholic cemetery and a secular cemetery. If there is a need, we will provide for that need. Now, in being responsible, we don't want everybody to line up and say, okay, well, I need a charity burial. Mm-hmm. But if Father says, hey, Queen of Heaven or Resurrection or whoever, this family did not expect this, they weren't prepared, this is a tragedy, can you help them? As the church, we will do it every single time. Because it's not our cemetery. It's all of our cemeteries, right? So it's important to understand that, because I think sometimes people think it's just, sometimes, I mean, it's hard, you know, when something costs money, we all think, oh, it's all about money. No, this is about us maintaining that burial right for everybody as the future moves forward. And there's going to be times, you know, there's going to be a day I'm going to be, I don't know if I'll be 100 and something like somebody was saying earlier, but hopefully I'll live to a long age, you know, an old age. And so I hope that there's somebody that follows me and has the same ability, at least, to be able to have Catholics involved in the Catholic cemeteries. So as far as transferability, it's an individual situation, but realistically, it's our biggest concern is just to make sure that we have Catholic families that are buried in the cemetery, you know, that we maintain that. Because in all honesty, too, that's what maintains our nonprofit and our religious cemetery, you know, restriction. I mean, because there's a lot of taxation and governmental type of stuff when we're a religious cemetery.
So when you gave up your grave,
Mm-hmm.
okay, well, this happened in my family, for instance.
Mm-hmm.
My parents, way back when my little brother and sister were practically toddlers, bought 4 plots at Rose
Mm-hmm.
Hills. Okay, so, you know, they've owned them all these years, and then one of my kids lost a baby. Their baby died after a week, and my mom and dad felt really awful, and they offered the 4th plot to the baby, so the baby took 4th plot. And then my parents passed away, and then my brother passed away. Well, my sister, she's single, and so her plot ended up being the baby's plot. So when we were planning my brother's funeral, she asked the people, could we make this plot a
Double.
double, so I could still be buried next to my parents. And I'm not putting Rose Hills down because I know that money is involved here and all of that, but they said, oh, sure. but this is what you have to do. We had to sell the plot back to Rose Hills and repurchase it as a twofer. And it was going to be so many thousands of dollars that my sister looked at me and she goes, when you buy yours somewhere, I'll just buy one next to you. Because I can't, as a family, we couldn't even.
I'm so sorry that happened to
Couldn't even
you.
do that. I mean, it was crazy. But I mean, so if that were to happen, like for instance, at a Catholic cemetery, would it be the same thing? Would you have to have the right to burial made into a twofer? Would it cost like a sell back?
Let me
and a
tell you, no,
repurchase
no,
at the
nothing like
current
that.
price?
The only thing that you would run into there would be what's called a disinterment. What's interesting now is that we don't do any of our burials single depth anymore. In Catholic cemeteries, this is just something we started since 1986, I think it is. Since 1986, all of our graves, regardless of whether it was purchased as a single right of interment, because we do have families, we still have couples that want to purchase side by side. They have the right to inter two people, but their imagery is that they're only going to have one person in each grave. So when we have situations like that, even now, we've gone to double depth already.
Okay.
Because we just have that anticipation. Again, we're servicing a faith. Okay, so it's a little different. We're not always looking for, okay, well, how can we make a buck off of this tragedy, type of thing. But we do have, if you were to go to Calvary or Resurrection, some of the older cemeteries, there's probably pre-1985, you'll find single interments where you can actually see them. And in that case, we would have to remove the person that's there, redig the grave to double depth, place the person back in, and then have the upper portion ready for burial. There is a cost to that, labor-wise, but no, you have to
Because,
buy the grave back. I've never heard of that. That's horrible.
Yeah, he wasn't even in that grave yet. We just wanted them to dig it double, put the double vaulting in.
But they couldn't do that.
But,
Ugh.
well, they could. They would have.
Or they sell it back to.
I can't tell
For a
you that
pretty
my
penny,
parents
huh?
probably paid practically nothing for that, because it was when Rose Hills first opened.
Yeah, a while back.
50, whatever years ago, and so imagine the cost of that same piece of
Yeah.
property. Yeah, no, we just sat there and went, oh, that's okay, just bury the brother and we'll figure this out later.
Wow, yeah, that's that's not good.
And even in cases where we have the grave that was originally sold as a single, nobody's laid to rest there, we'll convert it.
Yeah, we can convert it to a double.
Small cost,
Yeah,
not a whole
not-
read.
Not like you have to sell it back and pay today's cost.
Okay.
No,
Yeah,
that's
we were like,
ridiculous.
Yeah.
Horrible.
Okay.
It looks like we're coming down to the end. Any other last minute questions, maybe?
Is it also true that now at all the Catholic cemeteries, all the new graves that are being dug are already vaulted? Did I hear that before?
That's where we're moving towards. So even though you have certain sections that are in existence that we sell that aren't what we call standard or traditional graves, which don't have vaults in them, when you go into most of our cemeteries as they're developing now, everything will be a lawn crypt.
That's what they're doing at the military.
And part of the reason of that is because it's better for our environment.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't understand that once we dig a grave up, we have to remove that earth and replace it with new earth. That earth then goes and is transported to another area because it's considered spoils. So it can be very costly. So in order to keep the grave prices, at where they should be for our congregation, it's like we have to kind of cut a new dirt. And here's the thing, so if I'm doing a double burial, that's twice that I dig that up. So I'm transporting, and right now it's ridiculous. It's like they're sending the dirt to Arizona. I don't know why Arizona. So don't move to Arizona. but it's just, and it's not, I don't see it's any different, but that's what the state requires us to do, is that if you open up land in a cemetery, you have to dispose of that dirt, put new dirt in. So it can be very costly, but with the vault, we take that dirt out once,
Yeah.
right? Place the vault. There's only 18 inches of earth
Yeah.
that's placed into the ground after the burial is done, because most of it's all cement now. So it's very nice. There's a lot of advantages to lawn crypts because it's very level. You don't have some of the issues that you might have with traditional graves where you have, when we have a big rain, you want to see something spectacular, go to our cemeteries, and you'll see graves sunk going, what happened, you know? And it's just the settling of the earth, you know, so those things do happen. Well, folks, I want to thank you so much for your attention, and hopefully you guys got something out of it. We have a table over there. If you guys ever have any questions for me, one of the other things that I always do, and I try to do for everybody, is this is a ministry for all of us that are involved in this. Me being a regional manager, I'm always going to open up to anybody that I speak to. If you feel there's a calling for you to do something like this, feel free to give me a call. At least we can have a conversation about it, because there's very select few people that can do the job that we do, especially at need when people are actually meeting with families. So anytime, I think the best people come from parishes. So I always open that up for you, okay? So God bless all you guys. I mean, go out with your families. If you have any questions, you can get our cards, and we'll be more than happy to answer anything that's more private or that you need specifically. Thanks again, guys.